No need for marriage registration or property division, Mark said, leaning against our bedroom doorframe with a smug smile. Just pack your things and leave. His girlfriend Amanda stood beside him, her diamond necklace, my birthday gift from last year, blinking mockingly around her neck. I folded another sweater, placing it carefully in my suitcase. You're right, I replied, my voice steady. No need for complications. Mark's self-satisfied expression faltered slightly. He'd expected tears, pleading, maybe even a fight. Instead, I was calmly packing my belongings as if I were preparing for a weekend trip. My name is Olivia, and after 8 years of marriage, my husband had just announced he wanted me gone so his 24-year-old girlfriend could move in. The girlfriend who'd been my personal assistant for the past year. The girlfriend who'd organized our anniversary dinner 3 months ago. That's it. Mark stepped into the room, his confidence wavering. You're just going to leave? I zipped up my suitcase, finally meeting his eyes. Isn't that what you want? Amanda wrapped her arm around his waist, but I caught the slight furrow in her brow. This wasn't going according to their script. They'd expected drama, resistance, something they could use to paint me as the hysterical soon-to-be ex-wife. Well, yes, Mark recovered, puffing up again. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. I'll have my lawyer draw up simple divorce papers. You sign, we go our separate ways, no messy property disputes. I nodded, pulling out my phone. Speaking of property, I scrolled through my photos, finding what I needed. You might want to see this before we finalize anything. Mark's face darkened. We're not negotiating here, Olivia. The house is in my name. My family's money paid for it. You're leaving with what you brought into this marriage. I turned my phone screen toward him. Are you sure about that? The color drained from his face as he recognized the document, our marriage registration from 8 years ago. The one he thought had never been filed because he'd forgotten to submit it after our ceremony. That's not possible, he stammered. We never registered the marriage. I made sure. He caught himself, but it was too late. You made sure? I kept my voice light. Made sure of what, Mark? That you could throw me out whenever you wanted. That I have no legal claim to anything we built together. Amanda's grip on his waist loosened. Mark? What's she talking about? I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Your boyfriend here thought he was clever. Plan a beautiful wedding, go through the ceremony, but never file the paperwork. That way, he could avoid any messy property division if things went south. I turned to Mark, whose face had turned an interesting shade of gray. Isn't that right? You're lying, he snarled, but his eyes were fixed on the document displayed on my phone. That's fake. The registrar's office would disagree. I picked up my suitcase. You see, Mark, I figured out your little plan about a week after our wedding, when you said you'd handle the registration, but then kept making excuses about why it was taking so long. Amanda stepped away from him, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning horror. You mean you're actually married? Very legally married, I confirmed. I went to the registrar's office myself, filed the paperwork properly. Mark was just too arrogant to ever check. He assumed I was as naive as he thought I was. Mark lunged for my phone, but I was already sliding it back into my pocket. It doesn't matter, he spat. You can't prove. I have copies, I cut him off. Multiple copies stored in very safe places, along with 8 years' worth of financial records, property documents, and some very interesting emails about how you've been handling the company accounts. The mention of the company made him freeze, his family's precious business where he'd recently been made CEO. The position he'd gotten largely because of my behind-the-scenes work modernizing their outdated systems and processes. You wouldn't, he whispered. I wouldn't what? Ensure I get my fair share of what we built together. Protect myself from your attempts to leave me with nothing. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You taught me well, Mark. Always have a backup plan, isn't that what you always said? Amanda was backing toward the door, her face pale. I think I should go. Wait, Mark called after her, but she was already hurrying down the hallway. The front door slammed a moment later. I picked up my suitcase, enjoying the way Mark seemed to have forgotten how to speak. I'll be staying at the lake house, I said, referring to the property we'd bought 2 years ago. The one I'd insisted on having jointly titled. My lawyer will be in touch about the property division and divorce terms. Olivia, he finally managed, his voice hoarse. We can talk about this. Now you want to talk? I shook my head. 8 years, Mark. 8 years of me supporting your career, managing your family's business transitions, playing the perfect wife while you planned to make sure I could be discarded without consequences. I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. Oh, and that merger you're planning, the one that's supposed to be announced next week, you might want to hold off on that. There are some irregularities in the paperwork that need to be addressed first. His face went from gray to white. Those irregularities were his doing. Creative accounting I'd discovered months ago but hadn't confronted him about. I'd been gathering evidence instead, building my own backup plan while he thought I was obliviously happy in our marriage. You're bluffing, he said, but his voice shook. Am I? I stepped into the hallway. I guess you'll find out. By the way, that diamond necklace Amanda was wearing, the one you gave me for my birthday, I'll need that back. It's on the list of marital assets my lawyer will be reviewing. I left him standing in our bedroom, surrounded by the life he thought he could take away from me with a few simple words. He had no idea that while he was planning his exit strategy, I had been 10 steps ahead, preparing for exactly this moment. Some might call it paranoid, keeping such careful records and planning for the worst. I called it learning from the master of manipulation himself. Mark had taught me well, just not the lessons he'd intended. As I loaded my suitcase into my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I deleted it without responding. Her apology meant nothing to me now. I had bigger concerns, like making sure Mark understood exactly what happens when you underestimate the woman you thought you could discard. I pulled out of the driveway, leaving behind the house we'd shared for 8 years. But unlike what Mark had planned, I wasn't leaving empty-handed. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just about winning. It's about being prepared to win before the battle even begins. Part 2, 1200 words. The lake house was exactly as I'd left it 2 weeks ago, when I come up here alone to relax and recharge, or so I told Mark. In reality, I'd been meeting with my lawyer, carefully laying out the groundwork for what I knew was coming. I hadn't always been this calculating. When I first married Mark, I was genuinely in love, believing we were building a life together. The discovery of his deception about our marriage registration could have broken me. Instead, it had awakened something else, a determination to protect myself, to play the long game. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since I left the house. Mark's family was in full damage control mode. His mother, Eleanor, had called 6 times. His sister had sent a string of increasingly hostile texts. I ignored them all, focusing instead on unpacking and settling into what would be my new temporary home. Around sunset, a familiar black Mercedes pulled into the driveway. Eleanor. I watched from the window as she emerged, perfectly coiffed as always, her expression set in grim determination. I opened the door before she could knock. Olivia, she said, her voice clipped. We need to talk. I stepped aside, letting her enter. She'd always loved this house, had even helped decorate it. Now she looked around like she was seeing it for the first time, probably calculating its value as part of the assets she thought she could help her son protect. Would you like some tea? I asked, maintaining the politeness she drilled into me over the years. Don't play games with me, she snapped. What exactly do you think you're doing? Mark told me about your claims. I settled into an armchair, gesturing for her to sit. Claims? You mean the legal documentation of my marriage to your son. Or perhaps you're referring to the evidence of financial irregularities in the company books. Her face tightened. You're making a mistake, dear. This vindictiveness doesn't suit you. Vindictiveness? I couldn't help but laugh. Is that what you call protecting my legal rights? Tell me, Eleanor, did you know about Mark's plan when we got married? About his intention to keep the registration unfiled? She shifted slightly, and I had my answer. Of course she'd known. She probably helped him plan it. We were protecting the family interests, she said finally. You have to understand, with Mark's position in the company. I understand perfectly. I cut her off. You wanted someone who would support Mark's career, help modernize the family business, but never have any real claim to it. How convenient that must have seemed. Eleanor's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. What do you want, Olivia? Money? A settlement? Name your price, and we can end this quietly. I leaned forward, meeting her eyes. What I want is exactly what I'm legally entitled to. Half of everything Mark and I built together during our very legitimate marriage, including my shares in the company. She blanched. The company isn't part of this. Actually, it is. Those shares Mark transferred to me last year for tax purposes, they're mine. Legally, and unlike our marriage registration, I know he checked those documents very carefully before signing them. Eleanor stood abruptly. You're making a serious mistake. This family has connections. So do I interrupted smoothly. Would you like to know who else has copies of those financial records I mentioned? The ones showing how creative Mark has been with the merger numbers? She sank back into her seat, her face pale. You wouldn't dare expose that. It would destroy the company. I don't want to, I said honestly. Unlike your son, I actually care about the people whose livelihoods depend on the company's success. But I will protect myself, Eleanor, whatever it takes. She was quiet for a long moment, studying me with new eyes. You've changed, she said finally. No, I corrected her. I've grown. There's a difference. After Eleanor left, I poured myself a glass of wine and stepped out onto the deck. The lake was peaceful in the gathering dusk, its surface like glass. My phone buzzed again. Mark this time, probably having heard from his mother. His message was both predictable and disappointing. You're bluffing. You don't have the nerve to follow through with this. I took a sip of wine and typed my response. Check your email. I just sent you and the board members a preliminary report about those merger discrepancies. Consider it a sample of what full disclosure would look like. His reply was immediate. You'll regret this. I smiled, remembering all the times he used threats to get his way. How he taught me that power was about making people fear the consequences of crossing you. He'd never imagined I'd learn that lesson so well. My lawyer called as I was finishing my wine. The board wants an emergency meeting tomorrow, she said. Your email certainly got their attention. Good, I replied. Make sure they understand that I'm willing to keep things quiet. As long as Mark approaches our divorce negotiations reasonably. He won't have a choice, she said. By the way, Amanda reached out to my office. She wants to provide a statement about Mark's behavior, including some interesting text messages where he discussed his plans regarding your marriage registration. I hadn't expected that, but I wasn't surprised. Amanda was young, but she wasn't stupid. She'd seen which way the wind was blowing and decided to save herself. As night fell over the lake, I thought about the path that had led here. 8 years of playing the perfect wife while quietly preparing for this moment. Some might call it cold, calculating, even manipulative. I called it survival. Mark had taught me well, about power, about leverage, about always having a backup plan. He just never expected me to use those lessons against him. Tomorrow would bring the board meeting, negotiations, probably more attempts at intimidation from his family. But for now, I sat in the peaceful darkness, knowing that while Mark had been playing checkers, I'd mastered chess. And in this game, the queen was the most powerful piece on the board meeting was everything I expected and more. I sat quietly at the conference table, watching Mark's carefully constructed world crumble around him. His father, the former CEO, looked like he aged 10 years overnight. Eleanor sat rigid in her chair, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the polished wood. These allegations are serious, the head of the board said, shuffling through the preliminary report I provided. If even half of these discrepancies are accurate. They're all accurate, I interjected softly. Every transaction, every altered number, every hidden account. I have the original documents to prove it. Mark's face was a mask of barely contained rage. This is blackmail, he spat. She's trying to extort us because of our personal issues. I kept my voice level. No, this is accountability. I'm simply ensuring that both our divorce and the company's dealings are handled legally and transparently. The board members exchanged glances. They'd known me for years as Mark's efficient, supportive wife. The woman who'd helped modernize their systems, who'd attended every company function with a smile. They'd never expected the steel beneath the silk. What exactly do you want? Mark's father finally asked, his voice heavy. A fair divorce settlement. My legal share of our marital assets, and I'll retain my company shares with a seat on the board. The room erupted in protests, but I held up my hand. In return, these financial irregularities never become public. The merger proceeds, after the numbers are corrected, of course. And Mark keeps his position, though I suggest more oversight. Eleanor stood up suddenly. You can't honestly expect. Mother, Mark cut her off. His face had taken on an odd expression, something between respect and fear. She can and she will. I met his eyes across the table. For the first time, he was seeing me clearly, not as the wife he could discard, but as someone who learned from watching him, who'd taken his lessons about power and control and perfected them. The negotiations took hours. By the end, I had everything I'd wanted: a fair division of assets, my board position, and ironclad legal protections. Mark looked shell-shocked, as if he couldn't quite believe how completely his plan had backfired. As the board members filed out, he caught my arm. "How long?" he asked. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since the day I discovered you never filed our marriage registration," I replied honestly. "You taught me well, Mark. Always have leverage. Always be prepared. Never let anyone see your full hand until you're ready to play it." He let go of my arm, laughing bitterly. "I created my own worst enemy." "No," I corrected him. "You created your match. I just proved to be better at the game." 3 months later, I sat in my new office overlooking the city. The divorce was finalized, the assets divided, and the company was thriving under stricter financial oversight. Amanda had moved on to a job in another state, her youth and ambition focused on building her own career rather than attaching herself to someone else's. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor, surprisingly. Since the board meeting, our relationship had shifted from antagonistic to something approaching grudging respect. "Dinner next week," she wrote. "There's a new board member I'd like you to meet." I smiled, remembering how she'd once tried to threaten me with the family's connections. Now she was offering to make introductions. Power recognized power, after all. Mark and I maintained a strictly professional relationship at board meetings. Sometimes I caught him watching me with a mixture of regret and admiration. He'd wanted a wife he could control and discard. Instead, he'd gotten an equal who'd outplayed him at his own game. The lake house became my permanent residence, its peaceful waters a reminder of how far I'd come. I learned that strength wasn't about being cruel or calculating, it was about being prepared, about knowing your worth, and about never letting anyone else define your value. One evening, as I sat on the deck watching the sunset, I received an unexpected email from Mark. "You were right about everything. I'm sorry." I didn't respond. His apology, like his previous threats, meant nothing now. I'd built something stronger than his regret. A life on my terms, secured by my own wisdom and determination. Some might say I was harsh, turning his manipulation tactics against him. But in the end, I protected not just myself, but the company and the employees who depended on it. Sometimes the kindest victory is the one that prevents greater harm. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the lake in shades of gold and purple. I'd lost a husband but gained something more valuable: the unshakable knowledge that I was capable of not just surviving, but thriving on my own terms. Mark had tried to teach me about power through control and fear. Instead, I learned about power through preparation and principle. In the end, that made all the difference. As darkness settled over the lake, I raised my glass to the night sky. Here's to lessons learned, battles won, and the strength that comes from facing betrayal with grace and strategy rather than fury and defeat. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting ahead.